All right, guys, so thanks for joining me over here. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what a synthesis matrix is. So the name can be a little daunting because it sounds really technical, but the reality is it's a very simple concept and a very simple tool that can help you to organize your research. You're going to be using a lot of sources for your senior project. Now, you've chosen a topic that you're interested in. We've talked about, most of us have conferenced about what you decided to write about. And we ended up looking over in your proposal what was some of the background information. So where do we go from here? Well, a synthesis matrix can help with that, right? So what if I told you there was a better way to research and a better way to organize when it comes to a lot of sources? So a synthesis matrix is really easy. Let's break it down by the two words, right? So we got synthesis, and then we got matrix, okay? So with the first word, let's think of synthesis first. Synthesis is kind of like a car. Not just any car, though, a hybrid car. If you think about the way a hybrid engine works, right, it has a traditional motor. You still put gas in a hybrid car, and yet it somehow gets better gas mileage than a typical one. Why is that? That's because of the synthesis of technologies that is happening. A synthesis is a bringing together of ideas. So if you think about a synthesis in this case, it's where you use battery power and combine that with traditional motor, right? They work off of each other. And likewise, when you're writing synthesis, you're bringing together ideas that are maybe different, that maybe have different perspectives or have different purposes, like a battery and a motor have different purposes, but they can come together to create one thing. Now, another way of thinking about this is in terms of what a matrix is. Now, a matrix is what this little thing is down here. It might look familiar because it kind of just looks like a grid, right? It's a spreadsheet. In this particular case, this is for organizing teams. What they're trying to do is they're saying, okay, project A is going to require people from these different areas. Project B is going to require people from these areas. Project C is going to require people from these areas. This is a planning chart for a business, right? But a matrix could be anything. A matrix is simply where you have one category of items on the top and another category on the side, and you plot out where do those interact or intersect. In this case, if we were working on project B in our business, right, will we need HR and finance on project B? Sure. Will we need anybody from IT or marketing? Believe it or not, they won't need to be involved, right? So a matrix can be a good way of visualizing information and ideas and for planning. And that's exactly what we're going to use it here for, is for visualizing and for planning. So why should you use a matrix, right? A synthesis matrix? Well, one is it's a really cool way to visualize where your information interacts with each other, right? Where it intersects. So let's take a look at what one actually can look like here. What does a synthesis matrix look like? Let me pull one up for you here. So this is an example of what a synthesis matrix looks like here. Now, what they've done at the top of this is they've included their topic, right? Anxiety in graduate students. That's what they're going to be writing about. Now, here's the deal. After reading the articles and after doing some background research, which you've already done, right? The writer here identifies a couple major themes. Think of these as like subtopics. As they're talking about anxiety for graduate students, they've noticed that anxiety has multiple roles. They've noticed that it affects relationships, and they've noticed that there's a relationship to classroom environment. So those are three like subtopics, if you will, that they're like already seeing a lot of their research covering. So they decided to create these columns where they would break down maybe their paper into those three areas. So now they've already got these. Now, here's the thing. You don't have to have these right away. You might be at a point in your research where you only know one of your subtopics or two of your subtopics. Feel free to fill this in as you go and as you find new ones. So here at the top, you can see on the left, they've included the names of some of their sources. These are just author names they've listed out, right? What they've done is they've just included the date and the name of the author to help them remember which source it is. So for you, you might begin by including the names and the dates of the first few articles you already pulled up. What was some of that background research you used for your proposal? Include those, maybe 2 or 3 sources that you have so far. Maybe you have more than that you want to hold on to. But you'll see here what they do is they fill in what information each of those articles has in those areas. So notice here, FOG as a source actually has nothing to say about anxiety having multiple roles or its relationship to the multiple roles that grad students have, right? They say nothing about that. They do, however, talk about relationships in classroom environment. So what they've done is they've included information from that source over here. So anything that it had to say with relationships, they say students can be blackballed in departments because those within the department can be very critical. Now notice they didn't quote it, they paraphrased it, right? So what you can do is just simply type out very shortly, what does that source have to say about that subtopic? Or you could even write this as a question, right? So this could be a question up here. Either way, what you're doing is you're simply plotting and placing what they have to say, each source has to say about certain topics. You'll see that some sources have something to say about everything, like Wallenwitz, right? Davis and Coleman, on the other hand, this source only really covering one part of the whole paper, one topic. That's okay. But as you go down the line, you'll begin to see a visual of like, okay, when I'm going through topic number 1, multiple roles, this is going to be maybe the first few paragraphs of my paper. Here's all the information I have on that. Here's all the different perspectives. How am I going to put these together? Which ones might I want to cover first? But this is the information I'm going to use, right? This is the evidence I'm going to use for that part. Likewise down here and then here. But you can fill this in as you go, source by source, till you end up with this lovely beginnings of what could become an outline. So the writers included the names and the authors and the years. You might include more. I'm going to ask you to include the title too. There are some blanks. Remember, not every source has to cover all the topics. Some sources may be good for one part of the paper and one part only. So the last question you probably have, right, is how do I complete mine, right? So how do you complete yours? Well, what you're going to do is if you go to our Canvas site, I'm going to show you exactly where to find this, guys. And you go to today's class, you are going to see, oh shoot.
Yeah.
Is everything in place?
You weren't supposed to relieve me.
I know, but I felt like taking a shift.
You like him, don't you? You like watching him.
Don't be ridiculous.
We're gonna kill him. You understand that?
Morpheus believes he is the one.
Do you?
It doesn't matter what I believe.
You don't, do you?
Did you hear that?
Hear what?
Are you sure this line is clean?
Yeah, of course I'm sure.
I better go.
All right, so if you go to our Canvas site and you scroll down just a little bit past the check-ins you'll see for classes, you'll see that there is a new module labeled 22C formal outline, right? The beginnings of that, you'll see assignments right here. It's also linked in today's class, this thing called synthesis matrix. Now, under synthesis matrix, what you'll see are a few preliminaries, right? This is your assignment to begin working on. Organizing your research, you're going to be editing your own research organizer. It's called that synthesis matrix, right? And you're going to do this through Google Sheets. Now, here's the cool thing is I've created it for you as a template. So all you got to do is fill it in. So what you're going to do is click here where it says create your copy here. When you click that, it's going to immediately say, would you like to make a copy? You're going to hit make a copy and wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. It is going to be inside of your, it's going to be in your Google Drive. So you can see it right there, right? There's a copy of it. It's already there. Now, here's the cool part. I've included on the left here a place for you to put your key questions and topics. So these are some of those subtopics. So if in your background you've noticed you're writing about climate change, and you've noticed that one of the key topics of climate change is the impacts to the economy, right? I could write that as a topic, or I could even write that as a question. So what are the key impacts of climate change to the global economy, right? So that's like a subtopic, if you will, right? Because it's only one part of my paper. That's only part of what I'm looking at. So what I'm going to do up here then is with source 1, I'm going to actually write out the author and the title of source number 1. So source number 1, let's say I found an article by Andrews, and it's called Changing Times, something, climate change, right? I'm going to include it something like that. So what I've just done is included the author and the title, and now I'm ready to go, right? So this is the first question I have. Does that cover economics? It does, actually. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to include the information and evidence from that source. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just help myself out by putting in the page number as well. So even though I didn't quote it, it's going to help me out so that if I have to go back and find where that evidence came from and I'm citing it in the paper, I've already helped myself out by putting the page number in it. So I would do just that. And just going down the line, as you go, get into source number 2, number 3, what do they have to say about this? And as you go further in, maybe you'll find, okay, as I'm reading source number 2, I actually find that they also mention something about class. So I'm actually going to write something about that. What are the impacts on social and economic class specifically, right? How is it going to affect, like, let's say the wealthier versus the poorer people, right? How does that play out? So in reading some of what your information has to say, your sources have to say about maybe your first or second topics that you've come up with, maybe you're going to start adding to this, and then you're going to be able to start adding more information. Now, here's the cool thing. If you go over to the right and you start sliding to the right, you'll see that the sources continue to go, but I've kept the questions and topics on the left. So you can keep track of what it is you're trying to answer. You know, what does source 10 have to say about all these different areas? And again, leave them blank if they don't have anything to say. This is due on the 20th, though, so we have until next Monday at midnight to work on finishing this. The expectation is that you're going to include no less than 5 key questions or topics. So you should have at least filled through column 6 on this, okay, with some different areas that you're going to cover. The other thing you should include is up to 10 sources. You'll see source 11 and 12 optional. If you have extra sources you want to include them, great, but you should have 10 sources. And those 10 sources can include some of the background research you've already done. So I would start by including those ones you already have, and start working on those. But then after this, next couple classes, we're going to start focusing on what's some new information we can bring in. What are some of the new questions and topics we're developing that maybe we can get more information on. So with that, make sure that you get this downloaded, get your copy, and get started with it today, because you do not want to be doing this at the last minute. Guys, as always, if you have questions, reach out to me, and I will see you soon. Stay safe.